Two of the world's largest nations are suddenly warming up after years of icy silence. See how this changed color? Look at that. Trade routes are reopening. Pilgrims are crossing borders. Ministers are shaking hands like it's prom night. But does this mean China and India are about to become allies, or are they just frenemies with benefits? I am Mandatory Fun Day. This is Worldwide Wednesday. Here's everything you need to know in a couple minutes. Normally we cover like 8 topics during these. We cover many topics. But this time we're just covering the India-China relationship because I think it is significant and it's also very interesting. They were literally fighting each other with melee weapons in a specific location at one point, and that is crazy, okay? Imagine rolling up with the boys, you're all in uniform, you've got a fat lip in, and you're supposed to take baseball bats to the enemy. It was a classic Step Brothers situation, or at least that's how it's shaping up to be. The relationship is thawing though, and so who knows, maybe they become fast friends. At the end of the video, I'm gonna tell you exactly what I think is going to happen and what the worst case scenario could be, and I'm also gonna read some of my favorite comments from other videos. Before we get into what's currently happening, let's talk about the history of India and China, and specifically what's led to some of this friction. In 1947, India gained independence from Britain, and it inherited colonial era maps that left its northern borders poorly defined. The British had drawn the McMahon Line in the east, which China never recognized, and it left disputes from the very beginning on territory. The McMahon Line was the boundary between Tibet and British India. From the very beginning, ambiguity over territory created tension and friction between these two nations. In 1949, Mao Zedong declared the People's Republic of China after defeating the nationalists. India quickly recognized this new government, hoping to establish solidarity as two Asian nations emerging from foreign domination. Despite this, India and China both likely already had visions of regional leadership. They already had an idea of how they wanted this stuff to shake out. And obviously, both nations wanted what was best for their own nation. Yeah, why don't you laugh more while I'm trying to record this video? Sorry, I have to take a pause here because my video editor is sitting in this room and he won't stop laughing. So, yeah, see that? You hear the giggles? You hear those little bitty giggles? He's actually taller than me. It's normal-sized giggles. In 1950, China invaded Tibet. The PLA invades and they annexed Tibet, bringing Chinese troops directly to India's doorstep for the first time in history. India, which had seen Tibet as a buffer state, suddenly felt exposed and strategically vulnerable. This was the first major crack in trust between the two nations. In 1954, India and China came to an agreement. They signed the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, and this was meant to project friendship and non-aggression. They had a slogan, which is in a different language, and I'm not going to say it because I don't want to get canceled, but roughly translated, it meant Indians and Chinese are brothers. This slogan became a rallying cry, but even as the leaders exchanged smiles, China quietly built a strategic road through territory India had claimed. In 1959, the Dalai Lama fled to India. This was after Beijing crushed an uprising in Tibet. The Dalai Lama escaped across the Himalayas and was granted asylum. For India, this was obviously a humanitarian act, but for China, it was interference in internal affairs. This poisoned relations between the two countries. Beijing started accusing India of harboring separatists. That same year, Chinese and Indian troops started clashing along multiple points on the border. These were pretty small firefights initially, but they signaled the fragile border had become militarized. These incidents also foreshadowed the full-scale war that was coming. In 1960, representatives from China personally visited India to propose a compromise. India would recognize Aksai Chin as China's, and China would accept the McMahon Line. They refused, believing China was untrustworthy. This deadlock hardened both sides' positions and left no diplomatic off-ramp. The border talks failed. In October of 1962, China launched a surprise 2-front invasion across the Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. India's ill-prepared forces were overwhelmed, suffering heavy losses in just 1 month of fighting. China declared a unilateral ceasefire and withdrew in the east, but kept control of Aksai Chin permanently. The video is not over, but I want to tell you about my website. TheMandatoryFunday.com is where you can get all my merchandise, as well as access to exclusive content if you become a member. Members, in addition to exclusive content, get 20% off all merchandise purchases, and we also have a link on the website that'll let you buy regulation compliant clothing. This week's exclusive content, and probably all exclusive content going forward, is going to cover my personal life and what I've got going on in the Army, as a dad, as a person, as somebody that struggles consistently with mental health issues and desperately seeks the validation of people on the internet. Let's get back to the video. In 1967, just 5 years later, India and Chinese troops fought again in Sikkim, exchanging artillery and mortar fire. This time, India held its ground and inflicted significant Chinese casualties. The clashes restored some confidence in India's army after the humiliation of 1962. 1962. In 1975, 4 Indian soldiers were ambushed and killed. The killing shocked India, but both sides soon froze the border rather than escalate further. This ushered in a long period of cold peace with no combat deaths until 2020. In the 1980s, the tension was renewed. In 1987 specifically, India granted statehood to Arunachal Pradesh, formalizing administration over territory China claims as South Tibet. China responded by massing troops across the border, raising fears of another war. The crisis cooled, but it proved that the territorial disputes had never gone away. In 1988, the Indian Prime Minister traveled to Beijing to normalize ties, the first such visit in over 30 years. Both sides agreed to set up mechanisms for high-level dialogue. It marked a turning point, but the fundamental disputes remained unresolved. In the 90s, India and China signed agreements to maintain peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. They agreed not to use firearms within 2 kilometers of the border, a rule that would ironically lead to brutal hand-to-hand combat decades later. That's what I was talking about earlier in the video. These accords allowed relations to thaw, just as trade between the two nations began to grow. By the early 2000s, China became one of India's largest trading partners, yet at the same time, Beijing invested heavily in infrastructure across Tibet and the line of actual control, giving its troops faster mobility. India saw this as preparation for future confrontation rather than just development. In 2017, Indian troops blocked Chinese road construction near the strategic Siliguri corridor, India's vulnerable chicken's neck connection to its northeast. The two sides engaged in a 73-day face-off, with soldiers literally wrestling and shoving each other. The crisis ended with a disengagement, but distrust had deepened on both sides. In 2020, there was the Galwan Valley clash. In June specifically, Indian and Chinese troops fought with clubs, stones, and spiked rods in the Galwan Valley of Ladakh. At least 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese soldiers, likely more, were killed, the first combat fatalities since 1975. This marked the sharpest breakdown of relations in nearly half a century. Now in 2024 and 2025, we can get into the current tension, the current state of affairs. In 2024, India and China agreed to restore limited patrols along the line of actual control after the deadly 2020 clash froze them. In 2025, 3 key mountain passes are reopening for official trade, reviving economic activity along the frontier. China has also lifted restrictions on fertilizers, rare earths, and industrial machinery exports to India. Pilgrimage was restored into Tibet, and that resumed in June of 2025 after a 5-year suspension. Thousands of Indian Hindus are already making the trek. Direct flights and visas for tourists, journalists, and business people are resuming. Plans are in motion for cultural exchange programs. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. The Chinese foreign minister visited India recently, signaling Beijing wants a reset. Both nations face U.S. tariffs and shifting global supply chains, and this adds incentive to at least act friendly. 2025 marks 75 years of formal diplomatic ties, with both governments planning joint commemorations. Both Beijing and New Delhi stress they want a multipolar order, code for resisting U.S. dominance. They want to partner together so that they can compete with the U.S. both militarily and economically. So what does this all actually mean? This doesn't necessarily mean that China and India are allies or even going to become allies. It seems to be more about survival. Both of these countries are facing significant economic pressure. They can't afford endless standoffs with U.S. tariffs. Separately, they can't afford the cost economically over a significant period of time. The Himalayan disputes are still there, and any patrol incident could undo years of confidence building in a very short period of time. Economic factors will have enemies become reluctant allies pretty quickly. China's ironclad partnership with Pakistan does keep India wary. India probably won't do any kind of significant partnership with Beijing until they are no longer backing their arch rival. But China is not just backing adversaries of India. India is also backing countries that are adversarial to China. As an example, India is aligned with the Quad, which is the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. The Quad is not a formal military alliance, but it is a cooperative agreement, so to speak, between those 4 nations. It focuses on security in the Indo-Pacific, as well as joint military exercises, among other things. India is a member of BRICS as well, with primary members in BRICS being China and Russia. The fence-sitting or the split identity means that cooperation has limits. In addition to that, China's dam building in Tibet threatens India's river flow, an existential issue that they can't ignore. India still imports heavily from China, especially tech components. China holds more leverage here than it admits. So there is a lot working against a strategic alliance, a formal strategic alliance between these two nations. Both of them are doing things that the other does not like. Do I think it's completely off the table? No. At the end of the day, money is a powerful motivator, but both sides are definitely hedging their bets. The best case scenario for a long-term outlook would be cold peace with trade and cultural exchanges. The worst case would be border clashes that derail the whole thing. This is more, not really an alliance, but more like a co-parenting agreement between contentious exes. They don't like each other, but they'll sit in the same room for Christmas, or if the global economy forces them to. So at the end of the day, India and China are not allies, and it's not looking super likely that they will become allies. They're cautiously testing each other, restoring some trust, and they're also easing border and trade tensions, which is good for them, not necessarily good for the US or NATO. Their relationship is like a truce between two neighbors who still hate each other's dogs. The reset is definitely real, but it's fragile. A single border clash or tariff war could send it crashing down. For now, we can expect to see a significant level of increase in activity between the two nations, but I wouldn't expect, a military alliance or a strategic alliance anytime soon. Do you think this reset is actually genuine, or is it just temporary theater? Will India ever trust China as long as Beijing backs Pakistan? Will China ever trust India as long as it's working so closely with US and NATO allies? What is the bigger threat in your mind? Is it China's border moves or its control over rivers flowing into India? Let me know what you think. Let's get into the comments. Your propaganda, as in I'm gonna take a propaganda at more of your long-form content. Thank you. Thank you, Vex Thaladios. I also like the Pokemon reference. Russia has never tried to conquer Ukraine, otherwise the Ukrainians would have been drinking from ponds and rivers 3 years ago. That's insane. I'm literally looking at my video editor, he's laughing right now. Brother, be so for real with me right now. Is that real, Steve? Yeah. Oh my God, dude. Holy crap. Keep all of this in there, okay? Except for when I said keep all of this in there. Don't put that in there. Wrong. The United States have shit piss declared war on any and all nation that doesn't lick its dirty boots. First of all, our boots are clean, okay? We keep our boots clean. Turtle, L5G. That is ridiculous. We're not even at war with anybody. Why do you sound like Morty Smith joined the infantry? Oh my gosh, this is for sure the funny. You know what? This is the funniest comment I've read recently, right here. I like the neon signs. I like them too, and I actually had to re-record part of this video because I forgot to turn them on at the beginning. Is this your real voice? Definitely a unique voice. You would be shocked at how many people walk up to me in public and ask that, like when my kids are standing right there, right in front of my Letkamins. Nothing specific, just want to say hi to you and all of the beautiful people. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you. Hi. Miss Lilith8905 said, oh yeah, I like that. Give it to me at the end. Give it to me. Did you like that? Ronald Jones 150 said, yeah, you're pretty weird, but you're my kind of weird. Thanks, Ronald. You're my kind of weird too. You didn't pose this as an insult, so I'm taking it as a compliment. New shirt right there. Actually, that's a great idea for a shirt. That's a good idea. I don't know how I'd get that. I can't have that whole phrase on there because it's too long, but maybe I can figure out some way to work that. This was the India and China thaw in a nutshell. I am Mandatory Fun Day. This is Worldwide Wednesday, and that's everything you needed to know in a couple minutes. All right, I'll see you guys next time.